Thank you very much for that intro. So very excited to be here today and talk about this topic. As mentioned, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, commoditization, and the future of citizen data scientists. And what do we mean by commoditization? So with any exciting and emerging technology, it always starts off quite complicated, quite bespoke, and quite niche. And then as it picks up and it gains market share, mind share, it becomes relevant, then any technology really goes through this commoditization phase where it becomes easier. So we're going to be discussing what that looks like, what it means for you and people like me as well, and what does the future hold. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the momentum in artificial intelligence. So AI is obviously a growing opportunity. And as mentioned by Jeff as well from Snowflake, in this region in particular, there's a lot of value that can be derived from artificial intelligence when it comes to being able to do things like churn prediction at scale across many different regions in this, many different countries in this region. But globally, there is a lot of value that we're going to see within AI around these areas. Decision automation, so that is all about being able to come to decisions quicker. I would caution about fully automating decisions though. There's a term that gets thrown around a lot these days, which is becoming data-driven. I actually think based on what you've heard around biases and what you've heard around fairness and what you've heard about inclusion, we want to move away from data-driven and we want to be data-informed. We want data to inform us, but we still need people and we still want people to make decisions. So decision automation is a big area where AI can help, but we want those human gates inside of our decision automation. Decision support, we're seeing a lot of this already. So this is examples of churn prediction, security log analysis, many different other areas in telco and finance, fraud detection, for example, product recommendation, things like that. Well, that's smart products. Onto smart products. So that's product recommendation, engines, and telco location-based analytics is something that's huge in this part of the world. Mobile lending is something that's huge in this part of the world. So using artificial intelligence to be able to match location-based analytics to product recommendations for people, and virtual agents. So we're seeing a lot more of this, particularly in the telco space as well, just having that AI layer to sort of filter out a lot of the initial load coming into a call center, and things like knowledge mining and stuff like that as well, to be able to see what people are interacting with the call center. So there's a huge momentum that we're going to be seeing in AI. So it's important for all of us going forward. So what are companies looking to do next? Well, this is based on a 2017 Gartner report, but I thought I would bring it up because it'll be interesting to see where we are today. So they predicted in 2018 that 80% of data scientists are going to be pretty familiar with neural networks. And I think that's true. I think things like TensorFlow and neural network ensembles are pretty commonplace these days when it comes to data science use. Natural language processing, I think also they're pretty spot on. And in fact, I think with GPT-3 and OpenAI, I think we're probably gone way further than what Gartner could predict in this particular area. Then we start getting into where we are today, which is 20% of companies will dedicate workers to monitor neural networks. Not too sure about that. And more than 40% of data science tasks will be automated. I would say there's probably about 5% based on my dealings in the APAC region. I think a lot of companies these days are really starting to investigate and leverage artificial intelligence, but they're still in the mindset of getting their models trained. And a lot of the ML ops is still manual. There's still manual deployments happening, manual retraining. But companies are starting to think about it, but I certainly think the 40% is probably quite high. And then into the future, Gartner is saying 1 in 5 workers engaged in mostly non-routine tasks will rely on AI to do their job. I think that's certainly where we are going. We're going into a world of citizen data scientists and citizen developers. Now, whether that's going to happen by next year, 1 in 5, not too sure, but I certainly see in the next 5 years that AI is going to be a core part of almost anyone's job. In fact, if we were running this over Microsoft Teams right now, I could turn on the language translation and you'll be able to get this translated into your language natively. And that is an example of how AI is permeating through a lot of our business tools. So what is the play here? Where are organizations going with this? Well, from Microsoft's perspective, we've got this North Star that we call the digital feedback loop. And the digital feedback loop is all about being able to understand customers better. We'll start with customers. So we want a 360-degree view of what our customers are doing. And then that feeds into our product, our supply chain. That feeds into our operations. And that then also has a follow-on effect on making our employees more efficient. And this digital feedback loop, all of these 4 different pillars feed into each other. So by making our employees more efficient, we can have more efficient operations, for example, which allows us, again, to build better products. Whoops, skipped ahead there. And so how do we get to this stage? Well, there's 2 phases that organizations are going through today. One is this foundational phase of modernization, and then there's a transformation and innovation phase. It's 2 steps. Every company is looking to transform, but we need to walk before we can run. We need to go and modernize not just our data, but also our application landscape. No artificial intelligence, no neural networks, no machine learning is going to be good unless we can break down these data silos, as Jeff mentioned, and we can also start to make sure our data is of good quality. Then, of course, what we're seeing now, though, is the start. Some companies are starting here. Some companies we're also starting to see going through this innovation phase. And that's where we're using advanced analytics. That's where machine learning is becoming part of the change process inside of an organization. That is where applications, smart applications being infused with artificial intelligence are becoming more and more commonplace. And then also intelligent cognitive applications, as well as what we're seeing down the track. And the technology is already here for this. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But in some cases, there's really no need for you to go and actually build your own models these days. In some cases, some other cases, of course, there's still a lot of need for that. But in some cases, when it comes to translation services, speech-to-text services, object recognition services, you can leverage what's already been done for you and infuse these into your applications to make them smarter. So this here is really sort of the North Star that we see at Microsoft for many organizations heading. So what's next in terms of this space? All right, so what we have here on the left is some HTML code. And what we're going to do is we're going to look to some lessons of the past to try and figure out what's going to happen in the future. So if you're old like me, you remember the Dotcom Boom. For those of you that aren't aware, this is where in the late 90s and very early 2000s, there was a huge rise in what was known as internet companies. And the stocks of companies that were associated with internet technology, like Cisco and back then Amazon, and a few other companies went through the roof. There was also a lot of startups that got massive amounts of investment based on pretty much no fundamentals. And web development became massively in demand. Does it sound familiar when you think about trying to hire data scientists and data engineers today? Well, web developers that were writing HTML code became massively in demand. And it'd be interesting, just what are you guys, I think chat's disabled, but maybe you can have some guesses in chat to see what you think a web developer was paid at the peak of this boom. Do you think that they were paid a salary of $10,000 US? Or do you think they were paid a salary of $50,000 US or $100,000 US? Well, during the height of this boom, companies were paying web developers $200 to $300 US in salary just to write HTML code. Okay, that's a lot of money. What about today? Well, today, if you want a website, you can either go to a template web place to get your website done, or there's even technology now that's coming along that can write code for you. So artificial intelligence today has the ability to write code. AI can even start to write AI, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So this is what commoditization means. It means when we go from this phase of when technology is bespoke and complicated and hard, there's a lot of demand for resources. It's really hard to hire people. Everyone wants it, to commoditized, right? It's all the big players sell it for cheap now. It's quite easy to find resources. And even people that don't know anything about developing websites these days can sort of go and buy one off a template. And this is where we are. So back in the 90s, and even today in some different areas, there's a lot of paper-based systems. And at Microsoft, we actually invented Office to digitize a lot of those paper-based systems. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so forth was all about digital transformation in the 90s, taking a lot of these paper-based systems, getting them into digital, being able to email them, etc. Now we're kind of in this app-based world now. We've gone through this world now for probably about 15 or 20 years. In fact, I remember even after the Dotcom Boom, this was really starting to pick off, and there was a lot of outsourcing of application development. And it really sort of accelerated, I think, when Apple launched the iPhone and everybody wanted an app for everything. But then this world that we're heading towards is this AI application and AI world, this digital feedback loop that we talked about. And we're sort of in the middle. We're in the crossroads between the application-based world, where we have an app for everything, and then the automated AI world. And we really need to do this as well. So this technology must be democratized in an ethical and fair way. Why must it be democratized? Because we are going through an era of global challenges, such as we're going through an era of declining population in many countries. So that means the amount of working people the percentage of working people is getting smaller and smaller versus the percentage of non-working people. How are we going to maintain our standard of living? We need to find productivity gains everywhere we can. In other countries, there are different issues around things like food security. I was giving a talk just the other day to the Department of Agriculture in Philippines, and there are disease problems with crops. There are climate change issues that are happening, flooding. There is food security issues that are top of mind. And so these problems can only really be solved using things like artificial intelligence. And in this part of the world, in the telco industry, things like democratizing mobile lending, democratizing microloans, microinsurance. There's a lot of people in these parts of the world that their way of interfacing with the financial system is through a mobile device. And so for us to be able to get lending and money, and for us to be able to get in part of the financial system, we need to do things through mobile platforms. And for that needs to be backed by artificial intelligence. So we're at this crossroads, going from the app to the AI world, where we can really boost productivity. But this technology needs to be democratized. It can't just be in the hands of data scientists. So what does this look like? So this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'll talk about where most companies are today and where they are heading. So companies today are either when we think about how they operate, so how do they structure themselves to do data and analytics and artificial intelligence? Many organizations today that I speak to are either centralized or fractional. And 5 years ago, I also say at Microsoft, we're probably in the fractional part ourselves. Why? Because we just grew so big. We're geographically dispersed across the world. If I had to go to somebody in Seattle to get them to go and do some machine learning or data and analytics for me, then it would just be too slow. So a lot of companies devolve into this fractional model. And really that means you're dispersed. Everybody's kind of working in a silo. and so forth. Smaller organizations and many other customers that I talk to are in more of a centralized model. There is a centralized business intelligence team. They'll handle a lot of the requests. And then what they do is they'll do the reporting and analytics and so forth for a lot of the business functions, like finance, HR, or different business units. Now, this works okay. But one area where I've seen this completely collapse is in the airline industry. So I've worked with airline customers where their centralized team, their BI teams and their data science teams have been completely overwhelmed, especially last year, because their business got turned on its head. They went from primarily passenger businesses to freight businesses. And all of these ad hoc requests, or requests that used to be ad hoc coming into the central BI teams, suddenly got completely flipped on their head, and they were inundated and overwhelmed with them. Centralized teams also don't work if you're geographically dispersed for reasons that I mentioned. You need to give some manner of self-service down to your users. This is where we're moving into the hybrid world. So a lot of organizations are now adopting a hybrid model, which is where you still retain a central team, but you give a manner of self-service and a manner of autonomy to your different business functions in different geographies. You give them a manner of being able to access data and use self-service and maybe even access machine learning and things like that themselves. What's going to happen in the future, though? Well, Microsoft, we see this community model emerging. And the difference between the hybrid and the community is that everyone in the business is going to be a data analyst. Anyone in the business is going to be able to be a data scientist. These machine learning, artificial intelligence, neural network, all of these technologies at the moment that are gated behind fairly complicated code are going to be able to be used by anyone. And in fact, at Microsoft, we have Power Platform, and Power Platform is to AI and application development as Office was to paper-based systems. We've got the technology already. We want to be able to uplift anyone to be able to use AI and machine learning, whether they're a farmer or a fisher or anyone inside of an office. So this is where it's heading. We're heading to this community model. The technology is already there. It's just a matter of time before it's adopted. And what that means for people on this call that are data scientists and data engineers is that what it means for you is that the work that you'll be doing, instead of you doing this low value transactional data science and machine learning, you'll be able to move on to tackling harder problems. Back to that example I gave about the .com bubble and web developers. Are there still web developers today? Yes. They're working for big companies and solving challenging problems, but they're not building the basic mum and pop website anymore. So they've moved on to higher value tasks. So what is some of the technology that we're seeing that's enabling this new world of community data scientists and community developers? Because remember, apps and data go hand in hand. A big one is automated machine learning. This is something that has been around for a little while. What is automated machine learning? Well, effectively, it's a way of joining a whole bunch of different what we call ensembles together. So an ensemble is a bunch of different machine learning algorithms that solve either a classification, regression, or other problem. And automated machine learning is taking a whole bunch of these different ensembles together to solve a classification problem, for example. And the automated machine learning library or tool will run your predictions through all of these different models, and it'll choose the best scored one. Okay, it'll choose the best scored model. So automated machine learning is becoming better over time. The problem with automated machine learning in the past is that it hasn't been as accurate. And when I say not as accurate, depending on the data and problem and so forth, you can get anywhere between 70 to 95% accuracy. Now, in some use cases, that's fine. But where the impact of a false positive or the impact of a false negative is very high, you typically want to have avoided automatic machine learning. Give an example. COVID testing, you do not want a false negative, because that means that you've detected that somebody will have COVID, it doesn't have COVID, where they might have. So you want to make sure that you are 99.9999% sure of your model. But the accuracy today of automated machine learning is actually getting better and better. Some of the other areas, though, where automatic machine learning is becoming good is if you need to roll out a large number of models very quickly. Let's say, for example, that you want to model all of your different storefronts, maybe hundreds of these. Then this is where automatic machine learning can play a role, because it can go and model a lot of these different stores very quickly. You want to roll out models for each province, or in the Philippines or something like that, or in Indonesia, for example, Malaysia, where you need to build large amounts of models very quickly. This is also where it can help. And also, automated machine learning is coming with a lot more capability around explainability, and also things like feature importance, fairness, and ethical AI. So it's not so black box anymore. And automated machine learning is really driving a lot of this change, because it's putting machine learning in the hands of non-data scientists. So this is one area where things are changing. Another area is code generators. So what you're looking at here on the left is the OpenAI Codex based on GPT-3. And what this is doing is that this is basically taking in text, so you can describe what you want. And in this case, they're saying, animate the rocket ship horizontally, bouncing off the left and right walls. And then it is automatically generating the code to do that. And this is not just an application development. You can use GPT-3 to do machine learning. You can use it to write your machine learning algorithms and machine learning notebooks. And there are, the technology isn't 100% there yet, but it's getting there. And if you really need to quickly start writing some code, it's pretty impressive with what it can do. Likewise, GitHub Copilot is something that's coming out soon. And this is pretty interesting and pretty exciting. GitHub Copilot basically uses AI to go and auto-complete your code for you. So what you do is you give it a descriptive function name, and then it's going to go and scan Stack Overflow and GitHub and all sorts of stuff like that, and use AI to actually help write your code quicker. So these are the code generators that are already here. So you can already start playing with GPT-3 today, and GitHub Copilot is coming soon. And then from a business user perspective at Microsoft, again, we're really pushing the democratizing of AI to anyone. We have our Power Platform. And like I mentioned before, Power Platform is to AI and application development as Office was to paper. And that is the philosophy behind Power Platform. So Power BI, we're building to be the PowerPoint of analytics. And we're building more and more AI capability into Power BI. So for example, now in Power BI, you can go, I want to do a regression problem, and it's going to use automated machine learning on the back end. It's going to tell you what features are important, and then it's going to run your data through a machine learning algorithm before it actually gives you the result. We also, in Power Apps, there's no-code, low-code applications where you can go and you can quickly prototype or build an application with AI in it. So, for example, you can do object detection through the camera. There's also Power Automate, not really relevant in this conversation, but it's a way that you can go and automate workflows. It is actually an interesting platform, because you can go and connect various different data sources together to automate the flow of data, including going back on-prem. Power Virtual Agents. So a lot of chatbot companies today, when you're building a chatbot, you have to write code. But Power Virtual Agent is allowing a business user to be able to drag and drop various different functionalities to build a chatbot without having to write code. And then, of course, we also have AI Builder. An AI Builder means that a business user can upload a spreadsheet or can upload some data that maybe comes from our Power Platform or a common data service, and they can start using AI themselves. They can use regression to predict things, or they can use classification to get a yes/no answer without really understanding anything about machine learning. So the technology, the technology to commoditize is there. And this can help you as well, because you can quickly prototype things. Or if you're running a hackathon like you just did, business users can suddenly participate in this hackathon and help solve problems using artificial intelligence. So I've got 5 more minutes. I'm just going to just go through one last slide. So with everything that I've told you, do I need to worry? Well, the answer is no. You do not need to worry. Just like the role of the web developer, today we still have front-end developers. They are solving complex problems for all sorts of companies. Likewise, you won't have to worry as well if you're a data scientist or a data engineer. These technologies are just going to complement what you do, and they're going to free up a lot of the annoying stuff that you have to do. I mean, if you're writing a notebook, writing the same old training code over and over again, for example, is pretty cumbersome. These technologies will allow you to be able to scaffold ideas quicker, test ideas quicker, innovate quicker. You'll be able to do a lot of models at scale, and you'll be able to see which ideas work and which ideas don't work quickly. So they're really going to augment what you do today. So interesting space, an interesting world that we're heading towards, and I'm very excited to see what the future can bring.